This is Derek Diamond Experience!
Welcome to a very special episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast. I am your host, Derek Diamond. Before we get into the topic for this episode, be sure to head over to linktree.com/ddiamondpodcast where you can subscribe to the podcast. You can find links to the YouTube channel, social media. Everything you want to find for the podcast is at that one link, linktree.com/ddiamondpodcast. Normally, I release shows on Mondays where I interview independent filmmakers. I'll also do roundtable discussions on movie franchises, TV franchises, and I do the occasional review, which I will be doing today. I'm going to be reviewing Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always, the 30-year anniversary special, which dropped on Netflix last week, if you're watching this the day it comes out. And I've been looking forward to this for a while, ever since I first found out about it. Growing up, I was a huge Power Rangers fan. I was 7 when the show premiered back in 1993, so I think I was right around the beginning of the age demographic that they were going for. And going back and looking at it, I think they were marketing the show towards 6 to 12-year-olds, so I was right at the beginning of that demographic. So I think I was the perfect age for it. And Power Rangers was a must-watch for me. You know, it was in my top 3 of fandoms, up there with Ninja Turtles and Nickelodeon, where if Power Rangers was on, I had to watch it. And anything Power Rangers related, I got my hands on, from the action figures. I had the individual weapons that, formed the gun that they would use on occasion in the show. I remember seeing the movie back in, what year did that come out? Maybe 95 or 96, I can't quite remember. But I remember seeing that in the theater. Huge Power Rangers fan, up until around 96 when Power Rangers Zeo ended. And that was where I was kind of starting to age out and getting interested in other things. But I always remembered my fandom towards Power Rangers. And I even remember when I was in early college, I found these bootleg DVDs online of the old show, because this is before streaming, or anything like that. Like you couldn't find them anywhere because they weren't available on DVD, at least to my knowledge. So I remember getting those, and I would sit there and watch it, and I'm thinking, this isn't that great. Like it's not a high quality production show, but it's one that, I use this comparison a lot on the show. Nostalgia really drives something, way farther than maybe it should. And that's what I was kind of looking forward to with this special. It obviously looks more modern, the camera qualities are better than back in 1993. So I didn't quite know what to expect, other than maybe the quality would be a little bit better. Knew a little bit about the story going in, but I went in with an open mind, and there's a lot that I liked about it, and there are some things that I didn't like about it. But Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always was released on April 19th of this year as a Netflix special. It runs just under an hour, so it's really more like a special episode of the show and not really a movie. That's why I call it a special and not a full-length movie, because it's not 90 minutes or anything. Returning to the Power Rangers, Walter Jones as Zach, David Yost as Billy, Catherine Sutherland as Kat, Steve Cardenas as Rocky, and of course we have Charlie Kirsch playing Ming Quan, the daughter of Trini. Trini, who was played by Tui Trang back in the original run of the show, passed away in a car accident back in 2001. And it was never acknowledged on the show because Trini left along with Jason and Zach and were replaced with 3 other Rangers. But we never got closure on her story. We never found out what happened to her. And, as the Rangers got older, they went on to different teams like Zeo, Turbo, and is still going to this day. So I was excited that they were going to actually acknowledge that, and I was wondering how they were going to do it. And I didn't think it was done in a distasteful way, which if you haven't figured it out by now, I am going to be talking spoilers. So if you haven't watched the special, go to Netflix, watch it, and then you can come back and listen to this podcast. I didn't think it was done in a distasteful way. When the special kicks off, we see the Rangers fighting Robo Rita and the Putties near this, like, I won't say a gorge, but like on a cliff overlooking the water. Robo Rita, and we don't know how Rita has come back because in an earlier version of Power Rangers, Zordon sacrificed himself and unleashed the Z-Wave and basically turned all humans that were evil good and all the creatures into dust. So Rita had become good. Now, I understand that she made an appearance in another variation of Power Rangers, and I'm not sure exactly which one that is because, as I said, I stopped watching after Zeo. So I was curious as to how she was brought back. But I was excited because Rita was, a cool villain in my humble opinion. I also thought it was cool that Barbara Goodson came back to do the voice of Rita, and she sounds exactly the same. So, but I'm going to get into a little specifics on that when I talk about things that I didn't like about the show. So anyway, Rita kills Trini, and the show is about, or the special is about, dealing with the fallout of that, which was surprising because when you think of Power Rangers, you think of the wacky enemies, you think of the Zords, you think of the weapons, you think of something that's a little cheesy, a little lighthearted, and fun. The Power Rangers never really handled heavy material like that, which leads to, I think, the best performance that Walter Jones and David Yost have done as Zach and Billy, respectively, in their entire history of the show. And I was glad that the two of them were put in center stage because Billy was my favorite Ranger and still is. And Zach, I thought, was always underrated. So I was glad that the two of them got to be the center focus of the story along with Trini's daughter. And dealing with, having to raise her and her being the same age that they were when they became Rangers and them having to deal with her rebellious attitude was a cool little callback to the show when they were that way. And of course, chaos ensues from there. I like the dramatic story. I liked, as I mentioned, that Billy and Zach were in more of a lead role. This special hit so many nostalgic beats that I couldn't help but smile to, whether it was the music cues, which Ron Wasserman came back to do the music, hearing the guitar riffs, and, it felt like the old show. And I say to, listeners of the show, when I talk with filmmakers, that music is important when it comes to specials, shows, movies, whatever it may be, because you can have the most serious or the coolest action scene that you can think of, but if the music sucks, then the scene sucks. It takes you right out of it. So I think bringing Ron Wasserman back was a very cool and I think a very important thing. So I was glad to see his name in the opening credits, and who doesn't love the old Power Rangers theme? And to jump a little bit ahead, they do a cool callback to the old opening credits for the show at the ending, and they play a more modernized version of the theme song that was really cool. So I really enjoyed that. Even some of the cheesy dialogue, the Rangers would have their cheesy one-liners or puns when they would be fighting monsters or putties. You expect that. And yeah, they were corny, but they still made me smile. I felt like I was a kid again watching the Power Rangers, even though they're 30 years older. And the end of the special, whenever the Zords come back and they reform the Megazord to fight Rita's monsters, was really cool. And the recreating, the Tyrannosaurus Rex coming out of the ground, the pterodactyl coming out of the volcano. It was great, and I will say some of the CG in that was not great. Like the Zords themselves, I thought looked cool, and almost recreating a shot-for-shot remake of the emergence of the Zords was perfect. But once you got into the fight scene, it kind of reminded me of the CG from the movie that came out in the mid-90s. It was better than that, but not a lot better. So that kind of took me out of it a little bit. But the thing that hit me the hardest was the end when they called back to the show and they showed, I can't remember what season it was from, but Kimberly was playing, this song on a guitar. She was singing. Then Zach joined her and they showed shots of Tommy. They showed shots of Trini. And then you see the two photos in memory of Tui Trang and Jason David Frank. Jason David Frank, of course, passed away last year. He was still alive at the time that this was filmed, but he declined to be in the special because from what I read, he was wanting to distance himself from Power Rangers and focus more on this movie he was doing, which is going to be released fairly soon. I think it's called Legend of the White Dragon, which is going to be pretty emotional because it's his final performance, and he meant a lot to so many people. He and Kimberly probably are the two most popular Power Rangers of all time. So that song, along with that graphic at the end, it got me pretty emotional. And it was, even watching it back a second time, which I did this morning to prep for this review, it still got me pretty emotional. And it got me pretty emotional. So that's what I liked about the special. Things that I didn't like, I mentioned the CG during the final battle, which was not great. Mentioning Tommy and Kimberly, Amy Jo Johnson was not a part of this special as well. And there haven't really been specifics on why she didn't appear, but ultimately it's her decision. If she doesn't want to do it, that's her right to say so. And, I can't really fault her for that. Would it have been cool to bring her back? Of course, because she's one of the original Rangers. But, I know she's had a pretty successful career as a director, as a singer and songwriter. So who knows why? But, we just got to respect her decision, and it is what it is. Jason David Frank, who played Tommy, as I mentioned, was not in it. Austin St. John, who played Jason, was not in it. But they still used sound bites from them. Like they had, stunt doubles in their costumes. And especially with Tommy, because he had such a very distinctive voice and distinctive sounds he would make when he would fight. It was really more of a reminder to me that they weren't in the special. Like, I get they were trying to work around it, and they did the same thing years and years ago during the show when Jason, Zach, and Trini left, where they would have the voices, but you wouldn't see them, with their helmets off. Or if they were in the episode, you'd see their silhouette or something like that. So I get that it was a workaround, but anytime I would hear their voices or the sounds they make during fights, it was just a reminder to me that they weren't there. I would have liked to have also seen more cameos from other Rangers, because one of the main story points is that Rita is trying to capture as many Rangers as possible to power up this time portal that she's built so she can go back in time, kill the Rangers before they become Rangers, and then give 30 years worth of knowledge to her younger self. And we see, this, it's not like a montage, but it's a scene of Minotaur and the other monster whose name I can't remember. They're putting these little toy Rangers that, are the Rangers but have been transformed on these shelves to power the machine. It would have been cool to see a montage of some of the other Rangers trying to fight these monsters and they get captured. Even if it's just for like 5 seconds, still would have been cool to see them make an appearance. And my last thing that I didn't really care for, and something I'll say an improvement I would have made. I would have made Barbara Goodson's voice sound more robotic. Maybe that's the filmmaker in me worrying about, little tiny details like that. But Rita returned as a robot, but she still sounded like the normal Rita. And maybe you could have edited her voice in post to make it sound a little more robotic-like, but still very much like her. Little detail, and a lot of people may not think about that, but that's something that I personally would have done. But other than that, I can actually say I quite enjoyed the trip down memory lane. But it did make me think of one thing, and this is kind of a callback to the Power Rangers movie that came out in 2017. I would love to see a continuation of Power Rangers, but more mature. Maybe not like with a bunch of profanity and blood and whatnot, but a more adult-themed Power Rangers, and bring back David Yost, bring back Walter Jones, whoever will come back, bring them back. Almost like what Cobra Kai has done with Johnny Lawrence, Daniel LaRusso, and others. Do that with Power Rangers, and I think that would be really cool. You could do like a 6 or 8 episode season, and if it doesn't work, then you just don't do another one. But I personally, as a Power Rangers fan who is now 36 years old, I would love to see that. So maybe that'll happen one day. Who knows? But that's what I would do if they're going to do more specials, because it was a little odd seeing the characters who are now in their late 40s into their 50s still having, it was made like an old episode of Power Rangers. And I get it because it's nostalgia, but at the same time, those who grew up with Power Rangers are grown up now. And that's where it can be tricky with these, like legacy sequels or these specials that take place 30 plus years after the original run, is who are you making it for? Are you making it for the audience who grew up with Power Rangers and are now adults? Or are you making it for the kids who are 6 to 12 years old now? And I think that's what they've got to figure out, because this felt like it was trying to be both, with the more mature story, but still had the corny dialogue and, the cheesy effects and everything, which I'm not knocking. That's kind of what Power Rangers is, and I feel like they've embraced that. But I would like to see a more mature spin on it, not like the violent fan film that came out many years ago. That was too far. But do something kind of like Cobra Kai, where you take the Power Rangers and you put them in a modern setting and make it more adult. I think that would be really cool. So those are my thoughts on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always. If I had to give it a number grade, I'd say I'd probably give it like a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10. As someone who grew up watching Power Rangers, I really enjoyed it a lot, despite the absence of some of the bigger name Rangers. But it was still fun to go back and watch. So if you're a Power Rangers fan, I definitely recommend it. You can check that out on Netflix. It's available now. And let me know what you thought of this review. If you want to, give your thoughts on the special, which, funny enough, I actually do have. I did get 2 comments on Facebook. So I posted something on Facebook earlier today, asking you to leave your thoughts on the Power Rangers special. So we have, first up, we have Tyler Watson. For someone who hasn't really watched Power Rangers since Zeo ended, I thought it was okay. It's just as cheesy as it was 30 years ago. Billy and Zach were always my favorite, so it was good to see them take center stage. Totally agree with that. And Jacob Craig, co-host over at the Open Micers podcast. It was the perfect nostalgia grab that Netflix was going for, and I think it was a great decision to focus on Trini's daughter and the next generation of Ranger. I really wish they could have gotten Austin St. John and Amy Jo Johnson to return, but the movie worked nonetheless. And again, I agree with that. It would have been better had they had everyone that they could get, but I think they made it work for what they had. Will there be more? who knows? You know, it's with the 30-year anniversary coming up. Who knows what else they'll do? And I'm sure they'll do something else for 35, and who knows what they'll do for 40. And I shudder to think of how old I'm going to be when that happens, and I'm not going to say it out loud. But thank you all for listening or watching, however you consume this. Again, go to linktree.com/ddiamondpodcast to find where you can subscribe to the podcast, social media, YouTube information, all of it's there in one location. This upcoming Monday on the Derek Diamond Experience, I'll be reviewing Season 3 of The Mandalorian, as well as having a roundtable discussion on the show with Jason Robbins, who is my co-host over at the Nerd Cave Retro podcast, and Mr. Wally Phelps of the Dead Game podcast. And he was also nice enough to fill in for me the last couple of weeks on Nerd Cave Retro. So be sure to come back Monday to check that out, and we'll see you guys back here on Monday for another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast.